In 1983, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service carried out a covert training program, enlisting a select group of civilians to prepare for anti-terrorist missions abroad. Operating under false identities and civilian cover roles, they received rigorous training in weapons use, surveillance techniques, and psychological resilience. Among them, Alexandra Smith stood out as the only woman in the group. This video chronicles her transformation from an ordinary civilian to a covert operative, up until the moment their top-secret mission unraveled inside Melbourne's Sheraton Hotel at the end of November 1983. Alexandra Dickey was born in Singapore in 1957, while her father was stationed there with the British Royal Air Force. Military life was part of her world from the very beginning. Her father worked as a navigator, her sister became the youngest woman to be commissioned as an officer in the RAF, and her brother-in-law was a pilot for 7 years in the same service. As a child, Alexandra moved often, living in England, Cyprus, and later back in Singapore during her primary school years. In 1969, when Alexandra was 12, her family moved to Australia to start a new life. She began her schooling in Australia at a convent school near Perth before transferring to the Kabelia Church of England Grammar School in Katanning, in Western Australia's wheatbelt. After finishing school, Alexandra spent a year working as a copywriter for an advertising agency and then took time to travel overseas. Eventually, she returned to Western Australia and enrolled in a Bachelor of Arts degree at the University of Western Australia, choosing to major in history. During this time, Alexandra started to think more seriously about her future. She had always loved words, stories, and the world around her, so she began thinking of becoming a journalist. One day, she walked into the Australian Broadcasting Corporation office in Perth, hoping to take a step toward that dream. To her surprise, she managed to land an interview with the news editor. But the conversation took a sharp turn when he asked her bluntly whether she was aggressive enough to handle the fast-paced, demanding life of a journalist. Alexandra paused. After a moment's thought, she told him honestly that she didn't think she was. The editor's reaction was discouraging, and the encounter left her feeling disheartened. It was around this time that the Royal Australian Air Force began to look unexpectedly appealing. The pay was solid, the lifestyle promised to be interesting, and there was the added bonus of gaining valuable experience in personnel management. Alexandra signed on, at first, working in administration. But the path soon took an unexpected turn. One day, an officer casually wondered aloud why someone with her background had ended up in admin. With a BA in history and a strong interest in politics, wouldn't intelligence work be a better fit? The idea hadn't occurred to Alexandra, but it made perfect sense. Before long, she transferred out of administration and into the world of military intelligence. She soon found herself working at the Secretive Defence Signals Directorate in Melbourne, a world far removed from the paper shuffling she'd left behind. The door to the Secret Service had opened a crack. Alexandra first became aware of the Australian Secret Intelligence Service, ASIS, during her intelligence training course. All intelligence officers in Australia know of ASIS and its role, gathering intelligence overseas, often in difficult and highly sensitive environments. It was widely understood that the identities of ASIS agents were to be protected at all costs. One day, an ASIS officer, whom Alexandra would later refer to as Gary, came to give a lecture. His presence was captivating. There was little doubt she had become somewhat starstruck. ASIS, in that moment, came to represent everything she had imagined intelligence work could be. It was bold, strategic, deeply secretive, and far more exciting than the slow and structured pace of military intelligence. After Gary's lecture, the routine of her work began to lose its shine. Still, Alexandra was content. She was enjoying life in Melbourne. She had rented a flat in South Yarra, surrounded by the cosmopolitan and opulent charm of Toorak and Chapel Street with all the cafes, art galleries, trendy delis, and chic boutiques. On her daily commute to work at Victoria Barracks on St Kilda Road, Alexandra would sometimes pass Gary on the street. He would smile in quiet recognition, and she would be reminded of the shadowy life he seemed to lead, so different from her own. Occasionally, She would also run into another ASIS operative she had met when she first joined the Defense Signals Directorate. Oddly enough, she always saw him at a laundrette on Torak Road. It was a funny reminder that even spies had to wash their socks. As the only female Royal Air Force junior intelligence officer working in Melbourne at the time, Alexandra was sometimes called upon to assist with ASIS training exercises. When asked to do a bit of role-playing for their new field officers, she readily agreed. It was a welcome change of pace, and a thrill. Once, she even spent a weekend at the ASIS training facility on Swan Island, simply as an observer. Almost without knowing it, Alexandra was going through the first steps of being recruited. But the formal invitation never came. No offer was made, and despite her growing interest, she wasn't asked to join. Still, she knew without a doubt, if she had been, she would have left the Air Force on the spot. Then, life shifted once more. She fell in love with an Army public relations officer named Pete Smith. He was based in Sydney, while Alexandra was still in Melbourne. The Army and the Air Force, unsurprisingly, had little interest in arranging their lives around a long-distance romance. In the end, she made the decision to leave the Air Force and move to Sydney. It boiled down to logic. Pete had better career prospects, and he was earning more money. It just made sense. Before she left Melbourne, Alexandra met Gary one last time, in a brasserie in Torak. Over coffee, she told him plainly how keen she was to join ASIS or the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO. Gary was sympathetic but non-committal. He promised to make some inquiries. Perhaps there might be opportunities to take part in a few more training exercises once she was in Sydney. As they parted ways, Alexandra had the sinking feeling that her brief brush with the world of secret intelligence was coming to an end. 3 months after Alexandra had moved to Sydney, Gary called. It was unexpected. He said he had a job proposition for her. It didn't sound like the usual ASIS recruitment process, far from it, in fact, but she was curious enough to agree to meet. They arranged to catch up over coffee. Her husband, Pete, by now well aware of Alexandra's occasional involvement in ASIS training exercises, jokingly referred to the intelligence community as her funny friends. But he wasn't entirely comfortable with it. When he heard that a mysterious man from her past was coming to visit in the middle of the day, his suspicion flared, tinged with a bit of jealousy. Still, he agreed to give them space and stayed away while Gary came by. Gary wasted no time. What he told Alexandra was nothing short of explosive. He had been tasked with building a covert operations team, civilians, not career agents, designed to protect Australia's interests overseas. It would be modelled loosely on Britain's Fourth Arm from World War II. The team would be a patchwork of people from diverse backgrounds. Some might already have paramilitary or counter-terrorism experience, others would fill support roles. A select few would be trained for active, high-risk fieldwork. The team's existence would be so secretive that even most of ASIS wouldn't know about it. The Defence Forces and ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, would remain entirely unaware. Though some of their personnel might help with training now and then, they would never know the true nature of the mission. The training would unfold over 2 to 3 years, on a part-time basis at first. If all went well and the necessary hurdles were cleared, there was a chance it could become full-time. Gary looked at her and asked the question, was she interested? Alexandra could hardly contain her excitement. The door to the secret world hadn't just cracked open, it had swung wide. And she had no intention of letting the opportunity slip away. Determined to prepare, Alexandra joined a gym and started a strict fitness regimen. She began jogging early in the mornings, working to build up her strength and endurance. Though Gary had told her training wouldn't begin until March 1983, 6 months away, she was expected to be in top physical shape by the time it started. There would be pay, a tax-free annual retainer and a daily rate during active training. But Alexandra wasn't in it for the money. This was something deeper, more personal. She wanted to prove herself. She wanted to belong in that world she had glimpsed through the cracks. Months passed, and she heard nothing from Gary. Then, finally, In early 1983, the call came. Training would begin in March, with a 3-week intensive course at Swan Island, the ASIS training facility in Port Phillip Bay, Victoria. This was the real thing: no more exercises, no more role-playing. Alexandra's career as a trainee secret operative had officially begun. After flying to Melbourne, Alexandra was given the code name Jennifer Devron, and was driven to Swan Island for her first official training exercise. It was a small, select group, 4 trainees, 2 instructors, and Gary as their controller. The training began fast and hard, with high-speed Zodiac drills, racing around the island, packing and launching the boats like clockwork, and simulating submarine insertions and extractions. It was exhausting and exhilarating. The purpose became clear the next few days when they headed out into rough waters to rendezvous with a real submarine off the coast. Seasick and soaked, they donned balaclavas to maintain anonymity as they boarded the vessel. Life on the sub was cramped and relentless. They ran their Zodiac drills over and over: launch, escape, recover. After completing the drill, they returned to Swan Island for additional training in surveillance, firearms, and close protection. Weapons training became a daily staple, with particular focus on mastering the .22 Browning pistol and the Heckler & Koch submachine gun. The pressure to be precise, especially at close range, was intense, and although Alexandra had minimal firearms experience from the Air Force, she took pride in matching the skills of teammates with paramilitary backgrounds. Safety was paramount, and even minor lapses, like failing to properly clear a weapon, earned swift punishments, like push-ups on the spot. Anti-terrorism exercises were some of the most thrilling and demanding. Storming mock buildings with live ammunition, identifying bad guys by black dots on their foreheads while protecting a hostage, and reacting in split seconds under pressure became standard drills. Nighttime target shooting in pitch-black conditions tested nerves and precision, but Alexandra proved unexpectedly calm and capable. Hand-to-hand combat was less enjoyable. The mix of martial arts and brutal street fighting, complete with eye-gouging techniques and how to turn any object into a weapon, felt foreign and uncomfortable. She knew she couldn't out-muscle the men, but she adapted, relying on strategy and the assurance that she'd usually have a weapon close at hand. There were some disturbing exercises, too. In one, a tear gas canister was detonated in a small room, forcing each trainee to enter unprotected, suffer through the pain, and then repeat the process wearing a gas mask, only to take it off again. At the end of the 3-week course, team members were assessed and assigned either support or active roles. Alexandra, unsure of her performance, particularly in combat, was stunned to learn she'd been selected for the sharp end of operations. In June 1983, Alexandra married Peter in Perth. Not long after, he received an army posting to Canberra. Knowing she'd need a job that provided a solid cover and the flexibility to take time off without raising suspicion, she found the perfect fit. She joined the Canberra Times as an advertising representative, explaining her occasional absences by claiming she was still active in the Royal Air Force Reserves, a story the paper readily accepted. In August 1983, Alexandra took leave from the Canberra Times, supposedly for an Air Force Reserves exercise, and instead spent a week at the Australian Federal Police's elite driving school. It was no Sunday drive, this was offensive driving, with handbrake turns, skids, and high-speed chases. It was intense, thrilling, and slightly illegal. Back on the island, the training escalated. They rehearsed live fire protection scenarios, using smoke bombs and body-covering techniques to shield a VIP from simulated terrorist attacks. Surveillance missions stretched over days, often spent belly down in the scrub. Carrying firearms quickly became second nature. As the year drew to a close, the team were deemed ready for their most ambitious challenge yet, a 3-week operation spanning Sydney and Melbourne. True to form, the mission details were kept tightly under wraps, even from them. What none of them knew, not even their instructors, was that it would all culminate in a chaotic and humiliating debacle at Melbourne's Sheraton Hotel. The exercise was planned as a 3-week operation intended to consolidate all the training the team had undergone throughout 1983, from weapons handling and surveillance to offensive driving and tactical response. It was meant to be the ultimate test of their readiness, a seamless application of everything they had learned. Alexandra tried in vain to convince the Canberra Times to grant her leave to participate in the full duration of the exercise. In her everyday life, she maintained the cover of an advertising representative, a role that suddenly became inconvenient as the department insisted they couldn't spare her during the crucial Christmas campaign. Even her tried and tested excuse about being called away for Air Force Reserve's duty, which wasn't even true, failed to sway them. Still, Gary, the ASIS operative who had orchestrated the formation of the Covert team, persisted. He urged her to find a way to join the first part of the surveillance phase in Sydney, even if only for a day and a night. Eventually, under the pretext of needing to meet a solicitor about a land deal, she boarded an early morning flight to Sydney. Upon arrival, she checked into the Hyde Park Plaza Hotel using her alias, Jennifer Devron, and waited for further instructions. Around 11 a.m., she received a call from Philip, one of her team members, who soon appeared at her hotel room door holding a bouquet of flowers. The gesture wasn't romantic, they were to pose as a couple during a surveillance exercise. Throughout the year, the team had trained extensively in surveillance techniques under the guidance of ASIO operatives, who were under the impression they were instructing ASIS recruits. On this particular mission, she and Philip were assigned to shadow a man suspected of being a double agent. Other team members were stationed at known hotspots across Sydney, communicating via walkie-talkies to maintain a seamless tail and track the suspect's movements. The agent proved highly skilled, frequently disappearing into crowds or leaping onto buses just as they pulled away. Staying in radio contact with fellow operatives was essential, especially when the bulky radios and the need for discretion posed challenges, like whispering into a microphone on a packed bus. Their part of the mission concluded in Chinatown, where they casually handed off the tail to another team and returned to their hotel to change into evening wear. The suspect was expected to reappear there, and their new task was to identify his contact and eavesdrop. That evening, they took up a strategic position in the hotel bar, but their target bypassed it and entered the restaurant instead. Following him, they took a nearby table and ordered a 3-course meal. But just as they were about to start eating, the suspect and his contact abruptly got up and left. Abandoning their untouched steaks and bottle of Burgundy, they made a discreet exit, no easy feat, and notified another operative outside, who had been enduring the cold while they dined in comfort. They regrouped with 4 team members and launched into a chaotic car chase through King's Cross. After a series of misidentifications and near misses, they were eventually guided back on track by their instructors. By 11 p.m., the surveillance exercise ended. The next morning, she was back at the Canberra Times, picking up where she left off on the Christmas advertising feature. That marked the final time Alexandra was with the full team. Just days later, the final phase of the operation at Melbourne's Sheraton Hotel would collapse into a chain of missteps that no one saw coming. It turned into a complete fiasco and sparked a major political uproar, leading to dismissals within ASIS and becoming a key focus of the Hope Royal Commission on Australia's security and intelligence agencies. The incident led to the immediate termination of the secret project. In June 1985, Alexandra was summoned to the Department of Foreign Affairs in Canberra, where an ASIS agent handed her a note informing her that the operation was over. She was then asked to sign a document pledging not to disclose any knowledge of the operation's secret aspects. At the time, Alexandra was living in Adelaide with her husband, Pete Smith, who had become a public relations consultant. She was also the mother of a 4-year-old child, building a life shaped by the echo of a world she could never return to.